Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm coming at you live from Venice Beach, California. As you can see in the background, I'm like right near the beach. I'm actually moving here in about a month for work, so I'm really pumped about it. I've never actually experienced the West Coast. That being said, if any of you guys on the West Coast want to meet up, talk design, or just hang out, I think that would be really cool. So, drop a comment or shoot me an email if you want to meet up. I wanted to kind of build off my last video where I talked about my first 6 months in the field of UX. And I figured it would be a good idea to maybe give you guys some tips on how to land your first UX gig, since it's kind of fresh in my memory. And, I did a lot to really make that transfer happen. As I mentioned before, I moved from the more management consulting side to more the creative side. Same company, just did like a little internal transfer. But I'm really loving it so far, and I think you guys might find these tips valuable. So I'm going to probably give you like 5 or so tips on how to get there and how to get into the field of UX. So the first 2 things you want to consider when applying to your first UX role is, 1, how big is the company? Is it a startup? Is it a large digital agency? Are you going to work as a freelancer? And 2, how much of the entire UX process are you expected to own, and do you want to own? So if you're applying for a role, right, and you look at the job description, usually you can get a sense of what the day-to-day looks like in terms of the tasks you'll be doing. Are you going to be owning, the broad spectrum of UX, everything from UX research to synthesizing that research, creating personas, then moving into the low to mid fidelity wireframing prototyping stage, then moving into the visual design stage, UI stage, where you're creating like design systems and reskinning your wires and making them look really pretty? Are you going to own all of that? Or are you just going to own some of that, like one specific area of that large UX umbrella, which is kind of all encompassing, right? Everything from low to high fidelity. So like me, for example, I work at a massive digital agency. So like we have resources across the board. So we have dedicated UX researchers who strictly just do research and, are data analysts and can synthesize all this data and start to really understand our user and like create personas that make sense. And it kind of gives the people like myself, like the more hands-on digital designers, a sense of our user before we start actually getting into the nitty-gritty and like designing websites and applications. Like for me, like I didn't want to own the entire process. I had a bit of a visual design background, and I wanted to grow in more of the low to mid fidelity space. So it's like translating user requirements and user info into actionable interactive prototypes. That's kind of what I do on a day-to-day. I don't really do much user research. We have a whole other agency usually that does a lot of this stuff for us. I mean, we work closely with them, so like I still have a very good understanding of the user, don't get me wrong. But that's just kind of the nature of the agency space. Whereas if you were working at a startup or if you're working as a freelancer, you're gonna own that entire process. So that might be something that interests you. Maybe you wanna get more of a broad understanding of UX as a whole and kind of grow across the board. Or maybe you just wanna kind of drill down on user research. Maybe that really interests you. A lot of people I know who kind of enter that space come from more of like a psychology background, because they're really understanding like how people think, and that kind of leads them to user research, but they don't really have much digital design experience at all. Like they don't really even work in Sketch and InVision and Photoshop and those types of tools. And they kind of just stick to their research side. So those are the first 2 things I would understand. Like, where are you applying and how much of the process are you going to own? Next, you'll need a resume and a portfolio, of course. Now, before I get into portfolios, just know the goal of the resume is to get the recruiter to look at your portfolio. So, make sure you have a link somewhere on your resume to your portfolio. Make sure it's, I put mine at the top of mine, so it's like the first thing they see. Make sure your resume isn't over the top crazy in terms of like an infographic type resume. I would keep them moderate. You do have a bit more creative freedom, I would say, when applying to a UX type role. Just do a quick Google search for like best UX resumes. Should inspire you. You don't want to use like a cookie cutter Microsoft Word template to apply to like a UX or UI position. But don't go overboard, I would say, in terms of like how pretty they look. Obviously, it's going to be a bit more creative looking than like a financial services resume, like if you're applying to a bank or something. Definitely a bit more creative freedom there, but again, don't go over the top. Yo guys, the craziest shit just happened. There was a earthquake. There was literally an earthquake that just happened while I was recording this video. And I guess these are super common here, but kind of freaked me out. I'm like on this like deck up here, and the whole the whole roof just started like wobbling. So this is pretty cool that I got it somewhat on camera. I'm a little freaked out. That was like my first earthquake I've ever experienced. Hopefully I can get through this video. But yeah, where were we? Yeah, resumes. Sorry. Woo. Yeah, one tool I used for resumes was canva.com. Canva is a great resource for any type of designer, whether it's UX or UI, visual designer. It's basically a bunch of graphic designers submit templates for literally anything you can imagine, whether it's like a resume or a YouTube thumbnail or a Tumblr thumbnail, if you're into that. They basically have a bunch of professional graphic designers, designing all these things, and you can draw a lot of inspiration from those. I wouldn't steal their resume templates if you're applying to a UX role, but I would definitely get some inspiration in terms of like how they lay out, work experience and education and whatnot. It's a cool thing to reference that I'll link below or somewhere on the screen. Next, obviously, is your portfolio. You want to have a portfolio. I'm not going to get too much into the nitty-gritty of portfolios just because I've made a separate video where I shared a portfolio piece of mine. I think it's a decent portfolio piece that kind of covers everything from problem definition all the way up to like kind of visual design stage. So it kind of walks you through the process. Just know that a company is way more concerned with your UX process as a whole, how you kind of arrived at your finished product rather than the finished product itself, especially if it's a UX position, right? If it was a UI position or a visual design position, the finished product would matter a lot more, like how it visually looks. That being said, there is definitely a level of craft that is expected from employers. Even if you're not applying to a visual design position, they're gonna choose someone with good visual design chops over someone who doesn't have good visual design chops with the same level of UX experience, if that makes sense. Reason being, at the end of the day, even if you're doing a lot of low fidelity prototyping and wireframes, you're still a visual communicator, right? Like you're usually the one taking business requirements and translating them visually. So you need to be able to visually present your work to a client or a stakeholder in a way that is kind of a cut above the average person, right? Because they wouldn't hire you if they could just do it themselves. So there is a certain level of visual design experience that is required. Now, that being said, there's tons of great like UI kits, some free ones, some paid ones. I would invest in a few good ones that you can kind of use as templates. It'll really help you understand how like design systems work. It'll help you understand how to best lay out elements on the page. It'll give you a sense of best UX practices, like how to use hover states effectively. It could give you some ideas for navigation menus and how to organize content. So invest in a few good UI kits for sure. And just between those and just practicing, whether it's personal projects or those daily UI challenges, you can start building your visual design skills to a point where, you feel confident applying to any sort of design position. So that's a little caveat. You will need some level of visual design chops when applying to these UX positions. But if you're applying to like a large digital agency for a UX, low fidelity prototyping type role, they're way more concerned with your iterative process. Now, I know what you guys might be thinking. Jake, I don't have any experience. How do I get the experience without getting the job? Because the job is supposed to give me the experience, but I need experience to get the job. It's that really annoying catch-22 that we all experience. And I've been there. Don't worry though, there are ways to kind of develop your UX experience without having an official UX role. What I would do, and what I actually did in the past, is I just started thinking about problems that I'm facing in my everyday life. And this was something you can do, something practical. Create a list of like your top 10 problems that you're facing, and then try to solve them via digital design. If you can come up with I would shoot for maybe like a 10 to 20 screen flow that really solves a problem. That in itself could be a decent portfolio piece. And if it's something you can talk to and, it's somewhat research driven, you can kind of fake it till you make it here. And that's kind of, don't feel bad about doing that. That's what I sort of did, right? Like there's some level of pretentiousness that you need to have when applying to these roles, because it's a super competitive space right now, And all your favorite designers have done it in the past too, right? So don't feel bad about kind of pretending a little bit, but you're gonna need you need something to show that you understand the UX process and you have some level of digital design craft under your belt. So that's what I would do. Just come up with some problems and think about a way to solve it. Like, I don't know, it could be something super simple. Like, I don't know, maybe there's a problem with your commute to work that could be improved through design. Through digital product design specifically. So yeah, just think of ways to solve problems and you'll be on your way. Another tip I would give is just get your foot in the door somehow. So maybe you're struggling to land the exact UX role that you want. Maybe the employer is looking for someone with a bit more experience under their belt or a bit more of a refined skill set, which is understandable, right? Like, why would they take the risk on you if they could hire someone with more experience? It's understandable. But there are ways to get your foot in the door anyway, right? Some of these agencies offer these sort of like apprenticeship programs, or forget what exactly they're called, maybe like fellowship programs, where you're not exactly the lead designer on these projects, but you're more or less shadowing the lead designer. So you're like getting a sense of the UX process. You're learning how to articulate your ideas with clients and stakeholders. So it's giving you exposure without all the responsibility. And usually, the pay obviously is not where it would be if you were the lead designer on that project. You're more or less an intern. But usually these are maybe like 3 to 6 month kind of programs. And, if you do well, maybe they'll start to give you more and more responsibility and ultimately bring you on full time. That's one way to do it. Another thing you can do is explore UX bootcamps. Now, I would first try your best without having to do a bootcamp, usually just because these are pretty pricey. And if you really know what you're doing, you can pretty much accomplish the same result that you get from the bootcamp on your own in terms of like the portfolio piece that you're able to generate. I will say, like, some of these UX bootcamps do have partnerships with a lot of these top companies. So if they see you have, the bootcamp certification on your resume, like you're more likely to at least get an interview. But yeah, those are great. I mean, no bad things to say about them. I took one myself. I'm not saying it's the reason I got the job that I got, but I don't know, it definitely didn't hurt. So I would look into those. You can kind of do your own research. I'll link a few below, a few of the more well-regarded ones. But again, they are kind of pricey, and I personally don't think they're necessary, but they're great. And at the very least, you'll get a pretty decent portfolio piece to share with potential employers and whatnot. So that's another avenue. My last tip for you guys is, if you can, find a mentor. I was very fortunate enough to intern at a mobile app startup as an undergrad, and I wasn't even doing product design for them. I was doing more like of growth and marketing type work, but I got to work very closely with he was actually one of their co-founders, but he was also their lead product designer. So I got a lot of insight into his workflow and the tools he was using, and he was actually the reason I got into product design in the first place. He was a former consultant, very bright guy, but also very creative. And I really was inspired by how he was able to solve really complex problems through design. And it was kind of that moment I knew this was the career path I wanted. And throughout my whole journey, I've been able to stay in touch with this guy and bounce ideas off of him and ask him questions. And he's helped me really understand the career progression throughout the UX space, which I'll talk about in a separate video. But yeah, having a mentor is definitely something I would recommend. If you can't find a mentor, there's tons of communities, whether like Facebook groups or physical communities like meetups you can go to. So I would look into those. But yeah, that's it for now. Hopefully these tips are helpful in helping you navigate your UX journey. Also, hopefully I do not die by like a 400-foot wave triggered by that earthquake that I just experienced. I'm still like rattled from that. So if this is my last video, you guys know why. But yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback. Comment below if this was helpful or if you have any questions. Again, I'm going to link a bunch of stuff in the description box below that will be helpful to you. And yeah, feel free to email me, ask me any questions. I love helping you guys. You guys have been great. Thanks for supporting the channel. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, so that was kind of a goal of mine I set this year. So let's keep it going. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next one.